Howdy shipmates, it's Captain Dan here. Welcome to Story Time with Captain Dan. A time to tell tales old and new for young and old. A time to share together these tales just at the end of the day to kind of cheer us up before we go to bed. In these difficult times when we're all stuck at home due to the coronavirus. Now, each day I'm telling a tale, or I'd like you to suggest some to me, because one day Captain Dan's going to run out of tales and he needs some help from his pals. So if you've got any tales that you'd like to get to me, that would be great. And any shout outs or things you'd like, people you'd like to be mentioned in story time, I'm happy to do so. Just keep on doing so. We're in this one together, folks, all the way with Captain Dan. So here's today's story. And it's another one of Roger Hargreaves' classics from the Mr. Men series, which I loved when I was a little lad growing up all those years ago. I'm not sure there's a Mr. Captain Dan, but you know, who knows. But this is a great story about Mr. Topsy Turvy. So maybe I should try and wear Captain Dan's hat. What do you reckon? It won't stay on my head when I'm Topsy Turvy. I'm not practised enough of being Topsy Turvy. But here's the tale, Mr. Topsy Turvy by Roger Hargreaves. And it's for everybody who gets a little bit confused and a little bit upside down in life. So it's for us all really, because I do sometimes. Don't we all? So this is the story of Mr. Topsy Turvy. Mr. Topsy Turvy was a funny sort of fellow. Everything about him was either upside down or inside out or back to front, topsy-turvy in fact. It was all very extraordinary. There he is. He's got a flatter head than me so he can keep his hat on, you see. Now to give you some idea of how Mr. Topsy-Turvy, or how topsy-turvy Mr. Topsy-Turvy was, you ought to see his house. Just have a look at his house. The front door is upside down to start with. Can you see it there? And the curtains hang upside down at the windows. And the chimney pot, that's upside down too. All very extraordinary, don't you think? Inside is just the same. Just look at the clock standing on Mr. Topsy Turvy's mantelpiece. Can you see it there? Isn't that the topsiest, turviest clock that you have ever seen? Certainly the topsiest turvy one I've ever seen. And just look at the way Mr. Topsy Turvy reads a book. Not only does he read it upside down, but he starts to read it at the back page. Just look at that, how he reads a book upside down. Silly, isn't it? And just look where Mr. Topsy Turvy puts the stamp when he sends a letter to somebody. There it is. Have you ever seen anything like it in the wrong corner? Just to confuse the poor postman. Now this story is all about the time Mr. Topsy Turvy came to town. The town where you and I live. Nobody's quite sure how Mr. Topsy Turvy got there or even where he came from. But he did arrive. And we know that because somebody saw him getting off the train. The trouble was, he did it in a topsy-turvy way and got off the train on the wrong side, and he fell on the railway line. Which actually isn't very surprising at all, is it, for Mr. Topsy-Turvy? When he picked himself up and managed to find his way to the station, Mr. Topsy-Turvy went to a hotel to get a room to spend the night. There he is with his hat and his case. If you notice, they're upside down. Funny, isn't it? The hotel manager tried not to smile when he saw Mr. Topsy-Turvy. When he saw Mr. Topsy-Turvy walk into his hotel carrying his suitcase upside down with his topsy-turvy hat upside down on his head. He tried not to smile. A bit like people do to me when I go to the shop. Why do you think they smile at me? I don't understand that. Good afternoon, sir, he said. Can I help you? Now, something you didn't know about Mr. Topsy-Turvy is the way that Mr. Topsy-Turvy speaks. You see, he sometimes gets words a bit muddled up and gets them the wrong way round. "Afternoon good," said Mr. Topsy-Turvy to the hotel manager. "I'd room alike." The manager scratched his head. "You mean you'd like a room?" he asked. "Please, yes," replied Mr. Topsy-Turvy. Eventually the hotel manager managed to work out what Mr. Topsy-Turvy was talking about, and he was taken up in the lift to a bedroom. Then Mr. Topsy-Turvy unpacked his suitcase, put on his pyjamas and went to bed. He was rather tired after travelling from wherever on earth he'd come from. Nobody knows. The following day Mr. Topsy-Turvy went to town. But what a fuss his going round the town caused. He took a taxi from the hotel, but so confused the poor taxi driver, trying to tell him where he wanted to go, the poor man drove straight into a traffic light. "Oh dear," said Mr. Topsy-Turvy. "I am sorry very." Then he went to a big department store in the middle of town. He walked up to one of the counters. "I'd like a sock of pears," he said to the lady behind the counter. "You mean a pair of socks?" She smiled and showed him a pair of bright red socks, which Mr. Topsy-Turvy put on his hands. Then he tried to leave, but being Mr. Topsy-Turvy, he tried to walk down the up escalator, and all the people who were going up the up escalator all fell over themselves. It was a terrible topsy-turvy jumble. That day Mr. Topsy-Turvy did all sorts of topsy-turvy things. He walked backwards across a street crossing and caused an enormous traffic jam. Oh, what a terrible. Then he went to a library and put all the books upside down on the shelves and made everybody extremely cross. Then he went to an art gallery and insisted on hanging all the pictures upside down so that he could look at them properly. What a topsy-turvy day. And then, after Mr. Topsy-Turvy had been into town for just one day, he completely disappeared. Nobody knows. Nobody knew how he went or where he went, but he certainly went because he wasn't there anymore. The whole town breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness. But. What the town discovered, even though Mr. Topsy-Turvy had left, everything was still topsy-turvy. "Read all it's about," shouted the newspaper sellers, instead of shouting "read all about it." "News is the here," said the television newsreader, instead of saying "here is the news." "Morning good," people started saying to each other when they met, and do you how, instead of how do you do. Everybody was talking topsy-turvy. Can you think of anything to say that's topsy-turvy? Why don't you give it a try? Maybe I'll try my Captain Dan greeting in a topsy-turvy way. What do you think? No, I can't quite do that. Let's end in our proper way. Keep sending in your stories. Keep sending in your dedications, your shout-outs to folk. We've got to keep our spirits up, but now it's the end of story time with Captain Dan, so I'm going to bid you all a good night with my usual good night greeting. You know it by now, don't you? Can you get it right, or are you going to get it a bit topsy-turvy, do you think? I think we'll try and get it right. Oh, go on. Shall I keep it upside down just for Mr. Topsy-Turvy? Okay. Oh, it's fallen off. Oh, no, we better put it back on, hadn't we? Okay, we'll do it properly. Stop messing about, Captain Dan. Here we go. Good night. Good night. Oh, sweet repose. Don't lie on your belly, because you might just squash your nose. Night's good.